Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's July 24th. Today, we remember the man who brought lilacs to America. And we'll also learn about the man who created the Missouri Botanical Gardens, also known as Shaw's Garden. And we celebrate the French author who exchanged his personal library for a lifetime supply of cantaloupe. Love that story. And we'll also look back at an article from 1938, and the topic was tropical peas. In Unearthed Words, we'll hear an excerpt from Vita Sackville West. And then we grow that garden library with a brand new book for 2020, and it's gorgeous. And of course, it's all about creating incredible gardens and design mastery. And here's a clue: let the chase begin. And then we'll wrap things up with a little article from 1975 about something called the Dial a Garden tip line. But first, let's catch up on some greetings from gardeners around the world in today's curated news. Well, today's greeting is from Joanne, and she wrote in to share a picture of her first baby cantaloupe. And I had to laugh because that's perfect for today's show, where one of the stories features cantaloupe. Joanne wrote, "I've been gardening for 10 years, but I've never grown cantaloupe." And you know, Joanne makes such a great point, because no matter how long any of us have gardened, there's always something new to grow. There's always something new to try. Now, sometimes the vastness of the plant kingdom can make us feel a little bit inadequate. And if you've ever wondered, how many years do I have to garden before I feel like I have it mastered? I would tell you, you're not alone. Gardening has so many variables, and there's so much to learn. But I will share a couple of things that I have done to help build my confidence. Number one, a few years ago, I became a master gardener. Now, when you become a master gardener, it doesn't mean you know everything, but it does mean that you took some courses and that you have a peer group that shares your passion for gardening. Now, not all master gardener organizations are the same. Some are better than others. But one thing I want to make you very aware of is that this is a service organization. So it's not just about gaining expertise. It's about giving back. It's about helping people. And there are requirements. Now, I don't know how COVID has impacted those requirements, but I do know that the first year I served as a master gardener, I had 75 volunteer hours that I needed to complete. Some of those hours were more gratifying than others. And like all organizations, there's politics, and there's bureaucracy, and there's history. But I do know that the time I spent answering people's questions, doing research for them, helped me build my confidence in the area of gardening. And then I'll share one other little tip with you that I don't think I've ever shared with anyone before, but why not? I bet that there is a good chance that you have listened to the show You Bet Your Garden with Mike McGrath. He's one of my absolute favorites. I love listening to Mike's show. And one of the things I especially love about Mike's show is all of the listener questions. Now, years ago, before I started podcasting, I was very serious about building up my gardening expertise. And so one of the things I did after listening to Mike's show for a while is I would listen to the show, and then after Mike read the listener's question, I would stop the podcast and I would just attempt to answer the question. I'd be driving around in my car, pretending to talk to this listener, giving them my best advice, and then I would hit play and hear what Mike had to say. And I remember the first time my answer actually matched what he said, and it made me feel so good. like I was going down the right path. But then I also took note of the times when my advice deviated from Mike's. Now, sometimes that was due to regional differences or philosophical differences. But as is often the case with gardening, the answers aren't always black and white. You could line up a room full of gardening experts and ask the same question and get many different answers. Anyway, I just wanted to share my experience with you in case you have those same desires. A desire to improve your horticultural knowledge, a desire to help others, and a desire to build your own confidence. And of course, if you have a life experience or a resource that helped you develop your gardening confidence, I'd love to hear about it. This isn't a common topic that gardeners talk about, so I'm especially interested in anything you have to say about it. So, full circle moment here, back to Joanne. I say hats off to you for growing something new in your 2020 garden. All right, if you'd like to participate in the Gardener Greetings segment, just send your garden pics, your stories, your birthday wishes, and so forth to me at my email, jennifer@thedailygardener.org. Make sure you send it to the .org address. So jennifer@thedailygardener.org. Here's today's curated news. Today's featured article was written by Robert Miller, and it was in the Register-Citizen this past month. The title of the post was "An Ancient Ubiquitous Plant That's Easily Ignored But Shouldn't Be." Well, Robert's post was all about moss, and I love moss. Who doesn't love moss? And I especially appreciated Robert's insight. He wrote, "Because it's tiny and everywhere, it's easy not to see it. But moss is really too remarkable to overlook. Scientists now believe it was these simple plants spreading like a carpet over the face of the then barren earth that changed our atmosphere into the oxygen-rich state it's now in. Moss helped to create our world." And he quotes Kathy Hagedorn of the Connecticut Audubon Society. She says, "It's all over the place, and it's beautiful. Birds use moss to line their nests, and four-toed salamanders lay their eggs in the sphagnum moss at the edge of swamps. Because they're great at absorbing water, mosses prevent erosion, and they play a part in the forest cycle, helping the decomposition of downed trees and stumps." And then Robert quotes Jim Fusatola, who's the chief of operations at Moss Acres, a Pennsylvania-based company that sells moss to gardeners. And Jim says, "Pound for pound, moss delivers more oxygen to the atmosphere than any other plant. 15% of trees deliver oxygen to the atmosphere, but for mosses, it's 100%. And I did not know that. So, great article. Anyway, if you would like to read Robert's article for yourself, and you should, because there is tons of information in it, and there are also beautiful pictures of moss. All right, that's it for today's gardening news. Now, if you'd like to check out my curated news articles and original blog posts for yourself, you're in luck, because I share all of it with the listener community in the free Facebook group for the show, the Daily Gardener Community. So there's no need to take notes or search for links. The next time you're on Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the colonial governor of New Hampshire, Benning Wentworth, who was born on this day in 1696. American gardeners remember Benning because he brought the lilac, along with other trees and shrubs, to the United States from England. In 1750, Benning planted the very first lilac at the Wentworth home. And over 100 years later, in 1919, it was adopted as the New Hampshire state flower because lawmakers felt it was, quote, symbolic of the hardy character of the men and women of New Hampshire, the Granite State. And today is the birthday of the man who created the Missouri Botanical Gardens, also known as Shaw's Garden or Hank's Garden. And he was none other than the great horticulturist and botanical philanthropist Henry Shaw. He was born on this day in 1800. Henry is celebrated on the St. Louis Walk of Fame with this epitaph. Henry Shaw, only 18 when he came to St. Louis, was one of the city's largest landowners by age 40. Working with leading botanists, he planned, funded, and built the Missouri Botanical Garden, which opened in 1859. Henry donated the land for the Tower Grove Park and helped with its construction. He wrote botanical tracts, endowed Washington University's School of Botany, helped found the Missouri Historical Society, and gave the city a school and land for a hospital. Of Henry's gifts, the Botanical Garden is the best known, said as early as 1868 to have, quote, no equal in the United States, and indeed few anywhere in the world. Well, in addition to the Botanical Garden, Henry built the Linnaean House in 1882. It's the oldest continuously operated public greenhouse west of the Mississippi River, and it was initially designed to be an orangery, a place to overwinter citrus trees, palms, and tree ferns. And there's a little story that I love that I think reveals Henry's regard for the plants in his garden, and I think you might relate to it. This was posted in the St. Louis Star and Times on April 5th, 1933. Mr. Shaw was escorting a lady through his gardens, pointing out objects of interest. The woman said, I cannot understand, sir, how you're able to remember all of these difficult names. Well, Henry replied with a courtly bow, Madam, did you ever know a mother to forget the names of her children? These plants and flowers are my little ones. And today is the birthday of the French author of The Three Musketeers, Alexandre Dumas, who was born on this day in 1802. Now, here's a blast from the past, taking you all the way back to your high school English class. Alexander also wrote The Count of Monte Cristo. Today, if you read it with fresh eyes, you'll notice that it contains many passages about the garden. Here's one from chapter 44. The garden was long and narrow. A stretch of smooth turf extended down the middle, and at the corners were clumps of trees with thick and massy foliage that made a background for the shrubs and flowers. Now, as a person, Alexander was a larger-than-life character, and there are actually quite a few stories about him that gardeners will find charming. For instance, in the mid-1860s, the library in Cavaillon, France, was just getting started, and they reached out to Alexander for a donation of some of his books. Well, Alexander responded this way, I agree on one condition. Just as the town and the Cavaillon authorities love my books, So I love their melons. In exchange for my 300 or 400 books, I request a town bylaw be passed, giving me a life annuity of 12 Caveon melons a year. Now, the town happily agreed to the terms Alexandre set forth, and Alexandre received a dozen Charente melons every year until he passed away in 1870. As it turns out, the cantaloupe melons of Caveon are very happy growing in the soil and climate of the Durance River Valley. That region of France is ideal for growing cantaloupe. And today, Caveon is still the home of the sweet Charente melon. In fact, get this, visitors to Caveon are greeted by a 9-ton statue of a Charente melon. And the annual Melon Festival happens every year the weekend before Bastille Day. Now, as a gardener, you may wonder if a Charente melon is similar to French cantaloupes or North American muskmelons. And although they are related, they are not the same. Charente melons are sweeter, and they have a jasmine and apricot fragrance. Just before he died, Alexandre finished his final book, and he titled it The Grand Dictionary of Cuisine. It was especially poignant to see that Alexandre included an entry on the Charente melon. In fact, Alexandre did not mince words. He gushed that it was the greatest melon he'd ever encountered. And I discovered one more hilarious story about Alexandre that occurred when he was traveling in Switzerland. One day, Alexandre decided he wanted mushrooms for supper. Now, Alexandre only spoke French, but the owner of the inn he was staying at only spoke German. So, to convey what he wanted, Alexandre quickly made a charcoal sketch of a mushroom on the wall. After seeing the sketch, the innkeeper went out for a while and then came back and presented Alexandre with an umbrella. And there are many wonderful quotes attributed to Alexandre Dumas. Here are a few of my favorites. He said, "All human wisdom is summed up in 2 words, wait and hope." And then gardeners will like these 2. "It is not the tree that forsakes the flower, but the flower that forsakes the tree." And then this one, "To despise flowers is to offend God." And it was on this day in 1938 that the Miami News published an article with the title, "Tropical Peas Will Mitigate Relief Wants." The article began this way: "If English peas don't suit your palate, plant pigeon peas instead." This suggestion is from a Miami pioneer, Charles F. Sulzner, who through the years has pointed out to newcomers the advantages of growing tropical fruits and vegetables. Pigeon peas, as Charles demonstrated on his spacious grounds, grow on trees and may be had by the simple process of picking. Well, pigeon peas make a lovely and distinct addition to the edible garden. And the cultivation of the pigeon pea, Cajunus cajun, can be traced back more than 3,500 years. Other common names for the pigeon pea include the Congo pea, Angola pea, and red gram. And here's a clue to the common name pigeon pea. In Barbados, pigeon pea was used to feed the pigeons. Now, gardeners who love growing peas in the spring may thoroughly enjoy growing pigeon pea in the summer. It's a hardy perennial that can produce multiple harvests during the season. The sweet, fresh green peas are technically beans. They can be eaten raw when green or dried, and the dried beans need to be soaked before boiling. Pigeon peas have a nutty taste and a crisp texture, and the entire pod may be eaten. As a bonus, and as you might imagine, the yellow-red flowers attract flocks of hummingbirds, and the plants are also nitrogen fixers and enrich the soil. In Unearthed Words, here's a poem from the English author and garden designer Vita Sackville West. It's called The Land. When skies are gentle, breezes bland, when loam that's warm within the hand falls friable between the tines, so hollyhocks and columbines, the tufted pansy and the tall snapdragon in the broken wall, not for this summer, but for next, since foresight is the gardener's text. And though his eyes may never know how lavishly his flowers blow, others will stand and musing say, these were the flowers he sowed that May. But for this summer's quick delight, so marigold, and so the bright, frail poppy that with noonday dies, but wakens to a fresh surprise. Along the pathway stones be set, sweet Alison and mignonette, that when the full midsummers come, on scented clumps the bees may hum. Golden Italians and the wild black bumblebee alike beguiled, and lovers who have never kissed may sow the cloudy love in mist. Nor be the little space forgot for herbs to spice the kitchen pot. Mint, pennyroyal, bergamot, tarragon, and melilot. Dill for witchcraft, prisoner's rue, coriander, costmary, tansy, thyme, sweet Sicily, saffron balm, and rosemary. That since the Virgin threw her cloak across it, so say cottage folk, has changed its flowers from white to blue. But have a care that seeds be strewn one night beneath a waxing moon, and pick when the moon is on the wane, else shall your toil be all in vain. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Chasing Eden by Jack Staub and Rennie Reynolds. This book came out in January of this year, and the subtitle is Design Inspiration from the Gardens at Hortulus Farm. Well, as you can imagine, I get a lot of gardening books. And when I first read about this book last year, I immediately reached out to Timber Press and requested a copy. And I have to say, this is absolutely one of my favorite new books for 2020, and I adore the title, Chasing Eden, and the cover is drop-dead gorgeous. The author, Anna Pavord, said, "Vision, tenacity, and a perfectionist's eye are all the qualities that shine out from this account of a paradise garden created by two of America's foremost stylists." And here's the overview about Chasing Eden from Timber Press. One of the most spectacular private gardens in America, Hortulus Farm is the masterpiece of Rennie Reynolds and Jack Staub, renowned experts in the fields of design, gardening, and entertaining. And it's all beautifully captured in Chasing Eden, a lavishly illustrated roadmap to how they created their own personal Eden. Hortulus Farm is not only a model of classical tenets, but it's a showcase of how traditions can be successfully broken. And I love that. Gardeners will discover information on specific design principles from vistas and allays to hardscaping and water features. They will also learn how to adapt these principles to less than optimal settings. That sounds familiar, without sacrificing a site's sense of place. Both aspirational and practical, Chasing Eden will inspire home gardeners to create their own earthly paradise. You will read this book and then want to head straight out to the garden. And I say, let the chase begin. And I also hope that you get this book and then tuck it away as a gift for a gardener in your life, because it's really that caliber of book. And all the gardeners I've talked to that have read it have absolutely loved it. This book is 272 pages of gorgeous gardens and design mastery, and it's all shared to inspire today's gardener. Now, you can get a copy of Chasing Eden by Jack Staub and Rennie Reynolds and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $23. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. On this day in 1975, the Green Bay Press-Gazette shared a little notice for their Dial a Garden tip line. Readers could dial the number at any time and hear a taped garden message. And here were the topics that were posted in the paper. Now, bear in mind, this is 1975. On July 17th, you could phone in and learn about Russian olive diseases. On the 18th, 19th, and 20th, the topic was Dutch elm disease. July 21 was how to blanch vegetables. July 22 was growing cauliflower. On July 23, you could call in and hear about the birch borer. And finally, on the 24th, 45 years ago, you could have called in to the Green Bay Press-Gazette and learned about training young trees. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.